I'm Dr. Jessica Levy. I'm a holistic veterinarian with, so far, 29 years in, come May.
I'm Melissa Weidenhammer, natural rearing breeder and a certified canine nutritionist.
Today, we're going to tackle the question, raw feeding is so complicated. I don't know how to do it. How am I ever going to get a handle on this?
And so I think really we need to address why it seems so difficult. I think there's a lot of people out there now wanting to feed fresh food. Mm-hmm. I think that it's really, people are seeing the value in it and the importance in it, but it just seems too hard, too complicated, too difficult. And so we want to just kind of hit some of those things head on today and see if we can take some of, bring some clarity and take some of the overwhelm and that idea that it's confusing and difficult out of it. So first, let's think about so Dr. Levy, when people come into your office and you instruct everybody to feed raw, because that's just the foundation of health. So that's where you start most of the time if they're not already doing it. And what is it when people come in and they're like, well, but doesn't it have to be balanced? I don't know how to balance it.
Right, and I think what happened there is there's a massive industry that makes billions of dollars every year by convincing us that if we feed our dogs ourselves, we will do it wrong.
Right.
And since it says on the bag 100% complete and balanced, then that has kind of planted this idea in our heads that every time you put the dish down, it should contain a balanced meal. Or else you're going to hurt your dog.
Right.
And that turns out to be just fiction. That is not real life. So there's no scenario in real life where any of us eats a balanced meal at every meal. That's not even a thing. And your dog, let's say your dog had to fend for itself. Your dog is not going to catch a bunny, gather some wild blueberries, gather some dandelion greens, and make it a meal. Like, that is just not going to happen. So one of the things I loved about Ian Billinghurst's first book, Give Your Dog a Bone, is that he makes a case for not only why the balanced diet should not be fed, and his rationale is because it doesn't exist in nature. Like, you're just making something up that isn't a factor in their lives. And so I think that complicates it for a lot of people when they're like, oh my goodness. I remember the first time I read all the ingredients on the back of a bag of dog food, and I thought, well, I can't make this. I don't even know what half this stuff is.
Right.
And it took me years to figure out that that is correct. You can't make it, and you shouldn't.
You shouldn't. You shouldn't. I think if you've ever flipped over a bag of dog food, you see how long the list of ingredients is. And so here's what is misunderstood. One thing is, the reason that there's such a long list of ingredients is because all of the food that was used has been processed to such a degree that those nutrients have been processed out.
Right, and the food is basically like the first, sometimes only 5 ingredients. So there's something called the Great Salt Divide. So you read all the ingredients up to salt, and then after salt, everything listed after salt makes up 0.1% of the total or less.
Oh, okay.
And that's where you find all the synthetic vitamins, synthetic minerals. But even if you read through that list and at some point you come across organic blueberries and pumpkin, and there's so little of that in there.
There's so little of it in there. And really, the other thing too that's important to realize is that these are put back in to reach AAFCO standards, which really are minimums that are not even biologically what the animals need to thrive. They're just to merely have it survive. And then they're synthetic on top of it, which means their body's really not even utilizing very much of it at all. And so we really want to encourage people, don't get overwhelmed and fall for the trick of what you're seeing on the back of a bag of dog food. You're not supposed to replicate that at every meal. That's not how a dog should eat. And really, they're not getting everything you're seeing on that ingredient list. And then, so I think the second thing, so that's the first thing. The second thing is people think about fresh food and you have to weigh it and you have to measure it. And it seems very overwhelming.
If it's too much or, I mean, it does, honestly. I feel like some raw feeding books make you feel like, okay, get out your mixer, get out your blender, get out your grinder, your chopper, all your measuring spoons, all your measuring cups, and then you have to prep. Like, ugh. And it does seem very intimidating.
So that's the second thing that I think comes to people's minds. Like, okay, even if I could figure it out, but then it's like, well, but what even is it? Like, what do you even feed? Right? Because so what even is a fresh food or raw food? What are you supposed to feed them? Is it supposed to be chicken and rice? Is it supposed to be cooked hamburger?
Right.
Right? Like, so I think that's the third thing is just confusion in even what that means.
Right. I get a lot of questions about, do you have a recipe?
Right. Right. Because again,
there's
people don't
no-
want to
yeah.
miss an ingredient. They don't want to miss a nutrient. They want to make sure the
It's
bases
balanced.
are covered. Exactly. Which leads us into the fourth thing that I think really deters people from even attempting this is that you are afraid you're going to mess it up and your dog is going to be deficient and you're going to make them sick and they're going to die.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I thought when I first started feeding my dogs raw. I thought I might potentially kill them.
Yeah.
I did not know how the experiment would end.
Right. And so there's just a lot of, I think, unknowns, misconceptions that really can keep people from feeding this way. And it really, what we want to do next is bring some understanding into really what type of animal your dog is, because I think if we can bring clarity to that, what they should eat is going to make a whole lot more sense and seem a whole lot less complicated.
Right. Right. And your dog is an opportunistic carnivore. So they are carnivores anatomically. If you look at their digestive tract, look at dogs in the wild, they are carnivores. I still see veterinarians writing and saying things in lectures and stuff like that where they're like, dogs are omnivores. No, they are not. They are carnivores. Look at their teeth, look at their digestive tracts. They're clearly carnivores, but they're scavengers. They're opportunistic. And that is why dogs eat dead animals, right? That's a natural part of their diet. They also eat deer poop and bunny poop and dirty diapers and used tampons and your socks because they smell like you and their remote control because it also smells like you. And so dogs are opportunistic. They will survive eating a whole bunch of things that maybe is not ideal for them. But we know what dogs are supposed to eat in the wild because wolves. They eat dead animals primarily. And what does that mean? They don't eat just meat. Like you don't come out after your dog has eaten a bunny in the yard and find the little skeleton laid out.
They eat it all.
Yeah, they eat the meat, the bones, the organs, the fur, the teeth, the brains, the toenails, the eyeballs, the fluffy little tail. It's all gone.
So I think what's important for people to realize, a lot of us have been conditioned to think that our dogs are like this fragile, like machine, that if you don't give it exactly what it needs, it's going to break. And that is just completely false. And so once you can wrap your head around the fact that this is a scavenger, it's a carnivore, and it's opportunistic, it starts to help you zoom out a little bit and be like, wait a minute, are we being way too concerned about this?
Yeah.
Now, they should eat well, and we do feed them well. Typically, a raw-fed dog is going to be fed way better than what it would eat in the wild because we're a lot more intentional about how we do it.
Also, we're consistent.
And consistent. So we're not going to make it, we're not trying to make it sound like we're just going to send them out to the garbage can and, whatever they find. But the point is to give some clarity and understanding to what type of animal this really is going to really help us have a more laid back perspective, maybe a little bit on, and not be quite so worried about what they're eating. But then also too, Dr. Levy, you and I were just talking about this, their bodies are so resilient and they actually have the ability, because they're scavenger carnivores, to kind of assimilate nutrients in a way that, if they're not getting what they need necessarily, their body will actually kind of utilize it in the way that it needs.
Right.
From
Yeah,
a different
your
nutrient.
body has a lot of redundancy. And so if you don't have a certain thing or if one pathway isn't working, your body finds a different way. But honestly, I think both of us kind of find it remarkable that you can feed a dog some crappy dry food, vaccinate them, give them horrible junky treats, And, some of them will still survive. They will have a lot of trips to the vet. They're not going to look good. They're not going to smell good. And so with raw food, we can do better. Raw food effectively is shopping the perimeter of the grocery store rather than basically feeding your dog fast food at every meal and then saying, like, gosh, why do you have all these health problems?
And so we want to really break it down into some very simple basics about what even is feeding a raw diet. What does that even look like, right? And we really do break it down very simply. And so the bulk of raw pet food that is going to be found is going to be it's all ground up, and it's going to be done in the proportions of what is referred to as 80-10-10. And so that's 80% muscle meat, 10% bone, and 10% organs. And that's really, you cover a lot of bases when you just have that, and then you vary the type of protein you're feeding. So you certainly don't want to just feed an 80-10-10 of beef and chicken and go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. You're going to create a lot of issues. You might create a little bit of a deficiency in your dog, and you're going to set them up for sensitivities or food allergies. And so we definitely want variety within that 80-10-10, but we don't want to stop there either. But we will say the base of a raw diet can really be accomplished with 80-10-10, and that is not hard to find in raw pet food in this day and age. And then really it's a matter of having a variety of what we kind of have coined the term food groups. And so it's going to look like, a high quality raw egg, some, omega-3 sources like small oily fish or green lip mussels. You've got grass-fed green tripe is another great option. Certainly some fruits and veggies. They don't need a ton. I know a lot of the recipes online out there is really heavy on the fruits and vegetables. They absolutely have zero nutritional requirement for carbohydrates. So anything that is a grain, quinoa, rice, oats, all of that is absolutely biologically inappropriate. They don't need it, and their bodies, quite frankly, if they are overloaded in it, you're going to have a problem. It's not needed in dog food. It can be a nice option if you're trying to make, a dog biscuit that holds together. You might grind up and use oats or something like that. So it's in small amounts, it's certainly not going to hurt them. But to have it be a good chunk of their diet, you certainly don't want that. And it really is that simple. You're going to be able to achieve giving them a variety of vitamins, minerals, nutrients, and it's all going to be done with food that they can use. Majority of it should be through animal products. That's what their bodies are designed to use. And then, with those fruits and veggies, they should be processed in some way. They don't have amylase in their saliva to be able to process those types of things. So you kind of need to do the processing for them. And there's different ways that you can go about doing that. But it really is quite simple.
And they also don't need some of these things every day. So we kind of forget that even though we can go to the grocery store every day, fruits and veggies are not realistically available every day of the year. So it's not an absolute necessity.
And that can be a fun way to kind of feed fruits and veggies to your dog too, is it's like, what's seasonal? Right? And then maybe you could kind of do a little bit of that, and then that's just kind of what you kind of rotate in. But it should not be, don't kill yourself over doing all these fruits and vegetables, and you need to feed all of the rainbow all the time. I mean, it's just not necessary.
Yeah, because that's not realistic either. That's almost like trying to feed a balanced diet, which it's not worth doing. Variety in the proteins by far is one of the most important things. Variety in the fats, variety in the extras. And this is all doing a good job of raw feeding without supplements.
Right. We really don't want to use supplements if we can help it. Every once in a while, they're helpful.
They do serve a purpose, but you can feed a good quality balanced raw diet without using supplements. So you focus on balancing the diet over time rather than at every meal. And our raw feeding guide has specific information about how to do this. So if you have further questions, that is a great place to start. It has shopping lists, it has detailed instructions. And yet it's not a 200-page book.
No, it's less than 20 pages.
Right. It's actually super easy to do. So the 80-10-10s, I always think of like, that is a great starting place, because sometimes, like for me, the starting place was thaw, serve, thaw, serve. Like I had to figure that out. If I had to do anything else, add anything else, my head would have exploded. But like once you get that pattern down, once you look at your freezer, you're like, oh, do I have enough freezer space for my dogs? Then you can move on. Then your next step is to add more proteins, then speed up your rotation, then add the extras, add those fat supports, add the fruits and veggies. But you don't need to get there like right away. Again, your dog is not a machine. You have a ton of leeway with nature. And so it's a lot easier just to work with nature and kind of relax about it.
100%. So just know that if right now you're feeding a processed pet food and you've thought about doing this, even if you don't do it perfectly, and there really is no perfect way to do it, but even if you don't have all your ducks in a row and have it all figured out right away, dogs are very, very resilient. They're scavenger carnivores. And so they give us grace as we're learning how to do this stuff. A lot of us start with just a commercially made raw food that has all the stuff in there while we're kind of learning. But we made our raw feeding guide to save everybody a lot of time, a lot of confusion, a lot of money, right?
Because I think too, like we've seen those videos online where people have said like, everybody should feed raw, but before you start feeding raw, you need to do a ton of research. Our feeding guide saves you from having to do that.
Right.
We did the research, we did the experimentation with our own dogs. We have figured out what dogs really need. We've educated the heck out of ourselves. And it is not as complicated as people like to make it out to be.
So we're going to obviously link it down below, and we'll link a couple of our favorite raw feeding books as well if you want to look a little bit more into this. But just know that you're not trying to replicate what's on the back of a bag of dog food. You're not trying to do that.
Right. And you also, you don't have to wait until you discover 20 extra hours in your week in order to do this. You don't need to prep. You don't need a grinder. You don't need machinery.
Right. And so then to follow up to some people, they'll get the raw feeding guide and they'll kind of go through it and they will still have some questions, or maybe they'll want to customize it to their dog, but they're not quite sure how. I do consultations with people all the time. That's a bulk of Dr. Levy's practice, is really helping people learn these principles. And so we can kind of help walk you through that. But you will do so much for your dog getting them off of processed food and onto fresh food, even if you don't do it quote unquote perfectly.
Right.
They're going to get so much benefit, and you're reducing their toxic load a tremendous amount. So hopefully this helps to bring some, to simplify some of these things, bring some truth to some of these things, take some of the kind of misinformation out of, a lot of that's been put out there, a lot of fear, that kind of thing, to keep you from feeding this way. It's one of those things where we just wish everybody would try it. If you just tried it for a little while, you would see the difference in your dog. So hopefully this encourages you to consider raw feeding maybe a little bit more than you did before this video.